Well, hello there, and welcome into our next installment of our Bible study series surrounding the Lord's Prayer. We are moving quickly towards the end of the prayer, and we had planned to conclude this little Bible study series that goes along with the Wednesday night reflection times, probably here by the end of May, very beginning of June, and it looks like we're on track for that. And so we've been working our way through different aspects of the Lord's Prayer, not just so we can better understand them, but so that they can guide us in our own time of reflection and prayer. I've really been trying to focus on, in my own prayer life, just approaching the Lord with a mentality of recognizing Him for who He is and what He has done and thanking Him for that. And then allowing that to sort of reflect back into my own areas of weakness or lack, or maybe where I've tried to take control of my own life, or just have a mentality of wanting to do things a certain way because I assume that's the best thing to do. And then from there, really going to a time of saying, so Lord, what do you want to do? And we're finding that in the Lord's Prayer, that is exactly what's happening, right? That our Father who is in heaven, you are holy, you are good. We want your kingdom to come. So we're reflecting on him and what is it that you want to do? And then we need you to provide for us. We need you to forgive us. We need you to help us to forgive others, and that redemptive work that we talked about last time. And so today we're just going to spend a few minutes talking about this next little phrase that says, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." And we want to talk about, so what is God up to, and how does he lead us, and why would we say don't lead us into temptation? Is there a chance that maybe he would lead us into temptation? Is there a possibility that we are in some danger that we weren't aware of? And what about delivering us from evil? Does he deliver us from evil? Well, yes, but what about things that still happen that are bad, and what does that mean? And so we're going to be talking about those two aspects of the prayer for the next few minutes or so. Again, if you've missed any of these videos that go along with our time of reflection surrounding the Lord's Prayer, you can get all of them through our website and through our social media. They are available there, and hopefully they have been a help to you, just a little time of reflection here in the middle of your week. So let's jump right in and let's talk about what does it mean for the scriptures and Jesus' example of prayer to tell us, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. First and foremost, we want to understand that the prayer that Jesus has taught us recognizes the existence of evil. It does not deny it. It does not suggest that it's some just figment of our understanding or imagination. Jesus would not put this in the prayer if it was not a real issue. So it teaches us that evil exists. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go through. But when we look at what the prayer teaches us, it really teaches us about kind of a dual existence of evil. There's an evil in the way of temptation, and there is an evil that would lead us to sin, and there is an evil of bad things that come about us. A good portion of what N.T. Wright shares in his book about this section of the Lord's Prayer really focuses on the darkness of humanity and the pain and all of the distress that is faced because of evil in the world and brokenness and lostness. And so it's not just we think so much about evil just being things that we do that are bad, but it's really um, our behaviors, sinfulness, yes, but also that the sin of humanity has led to a broken world, that nature fell as well as humanity. And so there's no sense. Sometimes I think people want to um, suggest or kind of pinpoint Christianity as like, well, but you say you believe in a good God, so what about, all the evil in the world? How could that be true? Jesus himself did not deny that reality, that those things exist. In fact, he faces it head on here in his prayer. So, our Father who is in heaven, yes, you're holy. Yes, we want your kingdom to come. We want your will to be done. We want you to provide for us, you to forgive us, you to help us to forgive others. But there is this component of the real dark side of existence that we need to recognize that you are going to have to address in our lives. And so it is a very real part of where we're at in not just our day-to-day existence, but in how we interact with others, and even how we see our own soul. So Jesus uses some terminology here that sounds like a journey. Okay. He says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Leading us sounds like, there are steps that we take. There's a pathway that we go down. And so what we find in our encounter with evil is that it's not always just a line in the sand, just you're on this side or that side. It's happened or it hasn't happened. That there is this process, a little bit, if you will. And so that is true of both sinfulness and sort of the darkness that we face just in the brokenness of the world around us. Um, but usually, if we could address first the sinfulness, like our sinning or the sins of people, there is usually somehow a journey or a pathway or stepping stones that lead to that sin. In fact, scripture even tells us that it's when we are led away, right, by desires or by sinful desires, that we end up being led into sinning. And this is one of the reasons I think, particularly in our theology, that we try to differentiate between someone doing something that was wrong, that they need to be honest with the Lord and with others about, but maybe they didn't realize what they were doing or that they had erred, as opposed to a sinning that comes from allowing themselves to be led down that path. Now, we want to be careful here because we don't want to use it as an excuse about sin, like, oh, I didn't know, or well, I wasn't aware. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes we have allowed ourselves to take stepping stones away from being close to the Lord in a certain area, and then we are being led into evil. And so there's usually that pathway that leads towards evil and temptation. The conversation of the serpent, right, with Eve, oh, it's not what God said it was. It's not going to be like that. Okay. But then there's also a pathway away from evil through deliverance. And some people, again, let's talk first about our own sinning. Some people have miraculous deliverance instantaneously from sins in their lives that they never even think about revisiting. And then some people struggle with certain sins for a long time. And I don't believe that one or the other is indicative of their desire or passion to follow the Lord. I think that there is a spectrum, that there is a pathway, if you will, of deliverance. And certainly to succumb to temptation is sinning, um, but we need to surrender that temptation to the Lord and realize that He's with us even in the midst of it. That's different than saying He's leading us into it. He doesn't lead us into temptation, but He does deliver us. He's there with us in it. In fact, one of the best things that we can do when faced with temptation is to retract, extract ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and put ourselves back in the presence of God. Have scriptures, prayers, songs prepared to immediately turn our minds towards in times of temptation. So there's this, again, this journey that leads towards sinning. When we talk about the darkness of humanity, the brokenness of the world around us, sometimes the evil that is inflicted on us by others, we also find that there's a pathway through that, right? That the Lord is with us. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So this evil or this sin that we may encounter is both within us and outside of us. right? Just as I am, without one plea, right? That song says that, um, though tossed about with many a trial, many a doubt, fightings and fears within, without, the battle of good versus evil, and the fear that comes from being confronted with evil in the world around us is both within us and it's outside of us. We are confronted by our own temptations, our own fallenness, our own brokenness, our own sinfulness. We are confronted with the realities of that in the world that we live in, within and without. And it's a beautiful picture for Jesus to say that our Father, who is holy and pure and just, and who provides for us and forgives us, is also able to lead us away from temptation and also be with us to deliver us from evil. That is the relationship that we have with our Father in heaven. So the last thing that I want to kind of focus on in order to help us to understand this is John Wesley talks about um, kind of a proper understanding of the interpretation of this prayer from its original language. And he kind of sees it like this, okay? Um, that we have to see evil as the evil one. He says, when the verse says deliver us from evil, the proper understanding of the language would be the evil one, which means that the evil within us and without us, that the sin that we experience and that we experience from the hands of others is really the work of the evil one. So really what we're asking the Lord to deliver us from is the evil one. And that's important for us when we understand our place in culture. It is not necessarily our place in culture just to insist that the fallen, broken, sinful world around us see exactly what we see in redemption because they haven't experienced it. I read something this morning, I don't even remember who it was by, but they basically said, maybe instead of preaching how culture is evil and terrible, maybe we should create a new culture as Christians. And I don't think that person who said that meant like create a new culture, like separate, go away, do our own thing, and leave the world to fend for itself. No, let's be creating the kingdom culture in the world around us and where we go and where we live. Okay, so it is the work of the evil one. Our enemies are not the people around us. Unbelievers, people who disagree with us, those are not our enemies. The world, the flesh, and the devil, that those are mindsets, those are entities of the evil one. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. In other words, not just against the physical things around us, but against the principalities, the rulers of darkness. So when we go to prayer, we really need to be focusing on the the fact that what we are asking deliverance from, and I think that we believe this, but I'm not sure it always makes its way into our daily thoughts and our daily prayers. What we are asking deliverance from is not a system, it's not other people, it's the evil one. And where that deliverance starts, yes, it has outward components, but where that deliverance starts is lead us not to temptation. Lord, forgive us our trespasses. Lord, change my heart. That's really where it starts. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pray for the changing of other people. We should. That God would deliver them and change their hearts and minds. Absolutely. There's evidence of that throughout Scripture. But they are not ultimately the enemy. Even people who deny God and blaspheme his name, they are enemies of his, just like we are enemies of the king before we come to him. But our enemy is the evil one. That's where we need our deliverance, both within and without. And so as you go to prayer today and in the days to come, Lord, give us this day our daily bread, yes. Forgive us for where we've sinned. Help us to forgive others. But as we move forward, lead us away from temptation. Help us to find our deliverance in you and be with us in the darkness that is propagated by the evil one, that affects us. Instead, help us to find our hope in you. May the Lord bless you. I hope this has been an encouraging time for you. Check out the rest of the videos in this series if you haven't already, and I hope you have a great week.